to talk about unconferencing as a method to initiate organizational change towards societal sustainability. That's quite a complex name. So the question here is, how do you initiate organizational change? And not just organizational change, but organizational change towards societal sustainability, which is not just, you change not just your organization, you do not just introduce rapid prototyping or whatever, but you try to transform your organization in a way that it would become more sustainable or more helpful or more supportive for the society, which is a specific and situation. It's not just you change, but you try to change with the volunteer help of your colleagues. So it's a very strange case. So that's the case. I'm going to talk about the challenge. I'm going to talk about events, because unconferencing is an event format. As means to initiate organizational change, about the approach of unconferencing. I'm going to show you a case study, and maybe I will conclude something. I don't know yet. First, what you do when you're a scientist, the first thing is you look into literature if you identify a research topic. So I kind of listed for you key insights and questions from literature. There's a lot of group-level literature on innovation and creativity which addresses formal work groups. So like new product development groups. How do they make innovation? And Paul Carlyle will be here from this evening on. So you will learn a lot of those groups from him, but not from me, because that's not my case. I looked into literature, and I looked for literature on organizational change, which is made by volunteer people for the sustainability of society. And I have to tell you, there's not much. The issue is that if you, for example, decide as an organization we want to decline or to have less CO2 emissions, which would be such a change, such an organizational transformation, then you usually can't go to your employees and ask them to think about ideas in their working time. Usually you have to rely on that they would be ready to do this in their spare time. So what you would have at the end would be temporary and heterogeneous teams which are coming from different parts of the organization for the ideation and implementation process of such ideas. And that's a challenge, and there's not much about this in literature. But what literature says is that there's a need for learning environments for exactly those groups. So learning environments that stimulate the collaborative thinking and empower participants to take over responsibility. Do you see me? For the transformation process. And also, literature says that events enable people to develop ideas and bring them forward in transdisciplinary teams. So this is what we know from literature. There's not much about heterogeneous teams, but in general you have to have events for developing ideas if you want to transform your organization. That's basically what they say. And if we look a bit more into these event literature, then you see that this literature says events are means to initiate organizational change because they bring together people across organizational boundaries. Boundaries would be departments, for example. And because they kind of deliver a structure so that people would engage and would engage into processes of ideation, of learning, of change. So that's basically the function of events. And there are different event concepts, and you see there are technocratic approaches and more participatory approaches. And you have here all sorts of expert panels or workshops or conferences which are a bit the way like we have it now. There's somebody standing in front of you, or in case of the expert panel, there are important people in the room, and they decide, and then there's a top-down change process. So that's technocratic approaches, and then you have the other side. You have future conferences, you have open space conferences, and you have unconferences. And these are more participatory approaches where people like really get involved into change. So here you have rather strategic direction setting, and here you have rather the development of concrete action plans. And then there's also a difference between those and unconferencing, because even in open space conferences, you can stand close to the people you know. You can stand close to them and you can shut up. You don't have to say anything. And this is something we unconferencing does not support. So there you see the dissolution of power structures. That's one of the aims of those events, and I'm going to tell you more about the unconferencing approach now. So as a starting point, maybe this picture. You have here an organization, and it's like you have different people, and here they even look the same. They are not the same, but they look the same. You usually don't have this in an organization, but here you have it. But then you see that they are at different places, at different locations in the organization, and the organization looks different from the different places to them. These are their perspectives on the organization. So they are all different because these people are at different places, even if they don't look different. So, that's the issue, unconferencing. You have a challenge here, and I really like this picture of a challenge. Big fat challenge. Then you have different people, like two, for example. And those people, they have a perspective on this challenge and what should be done to solve it and so on. And those perspectives are different. So the first thing you would have to do is to bring them together, which would mean create structural links. So you link them across organizational boundaries, and to avoid power structures so that they would talk to each other. This is the first thing. Then you would have to help them to make their perspectives explicit. So to tell how they see the challenge. And this is quite challenging, because usually if you build groups and they talk to each other, then again you have this power system. In groups usually you have one person who speaks more up than the others, and then the others say, no, I had no idea, I don't have to add something, and so on. So what we usually do is we ask them either to draw or to build up things so that they would have something in front before the people who are in the group talk to each other. And then once they have something in front, they have to explain it, because there is something. They can't step back and say, no, I don't have to say anything about the topic. That's the idea. And once you've done this, you will have to help them to integrate their perspectives. So they would have to look at similarities, commonalities, and develop their knowledge further. And this is usually done in discussions in open spaces. So here you could use open space as an instrument to structure this. And once you have perspective integration and discussions, at this side also people would change. So in their heads they would change, they would develop new knowledge. And that's what we say is basically done in unconferencing. So it's learning as a social process, which is happening here in the discussions, and knowledge transformation, which happens in the head of the people. That's basically the unconferencing concept. There are some stepstones which you could use. Basically, you also have the presentation in your map if you want to go through it later. So there are some things which you could do which would help you if you would like to make people to develop innovative solutions. One thing is you reflect in action and you reflect on action. So not just at the end, but also while you are working on things. The second thing is you start with diffuse initial situation and complex problems, and you don't give people ideas how they could solve this problem because you want them to develop. So you kind of don't try to influence them from the beginning, but try to make it as diffuse as possible. And yeah, I hope you will succeed in this summer school with this. Then you will have to show that this is a real problem, it's a real life situation problem. This is what keeps people starting to work on it. And then you would have to allow them to take over responsibility for the change they propose. So you have to allow them to implement it at the end. So that's the ideas. Yeah, then that was basically what we had in literature on unconferencing. And from this we developed the unconferencing concept, and then we said, okay, we should maybe try it out. So we had a case study. We had, as Xara already told you, I'm at ETH in Zurich, which is a huge Swiss university, technical university. And they wanted to change. So we always find in literature societal claims towards university. They say universities should support the change of the society towards sustainability, and they should do two things. First, they should act as a role model, so they should transform themselves and become sustainable, so that other organizations could look at the universities. And then they should also, from this, provide impulses for societal transformation to other universities. But imagine this is the university board as a metaphor. So there are different people, and they have quite different ideas and different aims, and yeah. So it looks as if it's very, very challenging really to change something. And what I have here is my motivation apple, which is saying whatever you do will be insignificant, but it's very important that you do it. And because we had this picture, we decided to do it. So yeah, and basically you see here I'm starting with 2 on this slide. The process was, I had a student who came to me and said, you know, I'm allowed now to introduce a platform to the ETH where people and also employees can submit ideas on how to reduce CO2 emissions. This was a student coming to me, and I said, well, that's nice, it's another platform. I wouldn't do that before. I wouldn't have built up a community which would take over responsibility for those things. And so he did the second step before the first one. The first one we did then. The first one was, we had an unconference, 24 hours unconference, where we wanted to develop ideas on reducing CO2 emissions, and not just ideas. It was really project proposals. It was 120 students. It was 24 hours, so it started midday, ended midday. Students were allowed to work the whole time. So, but I think 2 hours of sleep everybody. So, but it was up to them to decide, and at the end they had to hand in a fully fledged proposal. Yeah, the EcoWorks Unconference. Basically, the event had 2 phases. The first one was a huge, very structured phase, which looked quite chaotic, because it was all about networking. So the first thing was about understanding who's there, so getting to know the other people, domain mapping, which means understanding what we are talking about, and then idea development and project scheduling. This was like 4 hours, 4 complete hours. It was just about getting to know each other, developing ideas, forming teams, and so on. And then in the second phase, they had a proposal writing phase, which was then also in another room, where they had like proposal writing sessions until they had the pitch. And I'm going to show you a film on this event so that you can get some more impressions.
EcoWorks is a new initiative at ETH. It's about ecological projects, it's about integrating people, it's about working together, and it's about coming up with new solutions at ETH.
The whole event developed over 24 hours, and basically it went into, I would say, something like 3 phases. The first phase was arriving at the venue, studying the topic, getting to know each other, and presenting ideas. The second phase was growing the ideas. And the third phase was then working out these ideas into fully fledged proposals.
Developing ideas needs a lot of creativity and space for just thinking, but also it needs a lot of talking between people from different disciplines, from different fields.
Everybody was really involved. We got experts to respond about specific questions. We got people sharing their knowledge and see how can I, as a student or an employee or as a teacher, be part of a global process related to all ETH members.
I'm very happy, I'm very pleased. We have 17 really interesting projects. That's more than we were expecting, so it's a great result.
impression from the unconference. This was the unconference. Before that, I told you what we wanted to reach by the event. And now I have to tell you we studied it. What we basically did was, this is very small, so I'm kind of reading it out. We wanted to know whether unconferencing really creates new structural links. We wanted to know whether it creates a power-free environment. We wanted to know whether perspective taking takes place, social learning and individual knowledge transformation. And we wanted, of course, to know what is the performance, what were the outcomes of the project. What we do was we had 7 observers who participated, also students, so people knew that there are observers, but they didn't know who it was who observed the unconference. And then we did interviews right at the end of the unconference. We had a participant survey and we analyzed some documents, and 1 year later we did again problem-centered interviews because we wanted to know whether the ideas were implemented or not and what happened on the way. So on the findings, what you can see here is we had people from 13 different disciplines at the unconference, and what we saw was that we created new and interdisciplinary teams. So there was no team that was not interdisciplinary and no team of people that came like this at the beginning to the unconference. And a lot of participants also mentioned that these dialogues with people from other departments with similar ideas were those things who provided them with the highest benefits. On the power-free environment, these are just estimations or observations from the observers, so it's not like 100% scientific. What you see here is, did you see a dissolution of existing groups, and did you see an emergence of new groups? And red is no and blue is yes. And what you see here is, so during the first phase until the idea market, we had we dissoluted existing groups completely according to their judgment, and we had new groups emerging. So at the end we had only new groups, only groups which didn't come like this. On the power-free environment, what we observed was how did roles emerge in the groups. And what we saw was that it was based upon experience, so it was not like I have the best title or the nicest name or the most experience, but it was I have the most experience. And then they also said that there was a quite cooperative development of ideas and that criticism was formulated in an objective manner. So this was what we observed. It's quite difficult to observe power structures. Then on learning, what we found was that social learning and knowledge transformation was interwoven. So people reported that they gained the highest learning results from capitalizing on other people's experience, so developing things together. From this they got the best insights. And there were 2 factors which played an important role for this. The first one was facilitation, because facilitation structured the process. And the other thing was engagement. So the engagement of the participants had an impact on what they learned. That was something which I mean it's not a real surprise, but something which I didn't think or thought before we saw the results. And also the sampling of time. Those who really engaged, they said it was so quick. It was 4 hours, and then it felt like half an hour or something. And everybody else who didn't engage, they didn't feel this. So engage this time in summer school. Performance and outputs, you already heard it in the film. We had at the end of the 24 hours 17 proposals, complete proposals, which were implementable, all of them. There was a reduction of CO2 emissions between 6,000 and 12,000 tons per year, a potential. and there were different winners, 4 different winners, 3 which were like, yeah, innovative but not highly innovative, so improvement of the printing system or eat less CO2 was about having regional food in the Mensa, or a train for playing was a calculator to raise awareness among the staff to take the train and not to fly, possible. So. But one of them, this Publica Low Carbon Fund, this one was high innovative and they got an extra prize. This one was about the pension funds of ETH, because they said ETH invests money into companies with the pension funds, and they propose to change the company, or to invest only in companies which had a low CO2 print, so to change the system. This was quite a political thing, and I think this one was very good, but at the end they didn't do it because it was too political, unfortunately. So on sustainability, we know that 9 projects were implemented, and there was a second event which we also facilitated in 2010, and there even they had an upfront agreement of the university board to provide funding of 100,000 Swiss francs to the projects. This was something they didn't have for the first event, so the university also learned through this. We also, with INO, we looked into enablers of the group performance, and we kind of separated the projects into good and poor. And medium, we also had medium, but we didn't look at those. And we said, so good projects are those who were a winner in the event, who were implemented, and who produced direct and measurable CO2 cuttings. Those were the winners. And there were 3 kind of enablers. The first one was less is more. Those projects who were winners, they had very small groups. There were 2 to 3 people, whereas these poor projects had 6 to 7 people in their group. That was quite a surprise for me. Then strong leadership. We want strong leadership. They had a convinced and focused idea owner who drove the project team through the process. So in other teams they reported, yeah, then we looked at this, then we looked at that, and then we recognized that we have to do this, and so they kind of wandered around. But in those teams, they were very focused. And this is linked to the third factor, the will to implement. So those people who led the winner project, they came there because they wanted to implement their ideas and not just to win the competition. The people from the poor performing project wanted to win the competition. That was the difference. So that's basically it. I'm skipping the conclusion, and I'm going to beyond the conclusion. There was somebody, Holger Brandsmeier. he was the last one at the last day, and he just told me that he just came at the first day because he convinced that it was not worth to participate in the event, and that he wanted just to come and convince himself and then leave after 30 minutes. And yeah, he was the last one to leave, but I maybe also because I asked him to write this down.